Hello there guys, you're listening to Ebird Online and I'm back with another review. And today I'm going to be talking about Kalani and Asuelu. We've got an awful lot to discuss, so I'm very quickly going to say subscribe to my channel, show the Ebird a little bit of love, and also please don't forget to click the like button. So without further ado, I give you Kalani and Asuelu. So we first meet up with these guys and they're sitting in the back garden, and Kalani's asking Asuelu how things have been with his family since they left. He's got no idea, Kalani, although they have got a little doll that looks just like you and they put pins in it, but other than that, he's got no clue. So Asuelu said, how do you feel about things? And Kalani said, I thought our relationship was progressing, but it doesn't seem as if it is. And so Asuelu said, I don't want your family to get involved in my relationship with my mum and sister. Asuelu, I'd call giving them money being somewhat involved. Are you telling me that you want to live for free at Kalani's parents' house so that you can give all the money that you earn to your greedy mum? That's being involved. And then Kalani pointed out, well, your family gets involved in our business all the time. And then she decided to tell a mighty fib. She said the difference between us is you just scream and shout, and I sit and patiently talk through things with your family. Do you, Kalani? Let's have a look, shall we? Let's have a look.
Here to tell you guys, I just don't know why you all feel entitled to me and my family's money, and that however you feel that way. But at the end of the day, it is going to be what I say.
It does make me laugh because I'd like to say it's just the delivery, but it's actually the message as well. And before you guys try and come for me in my comments, I fully agree with what Kalani's saying, but I don't think that anybody could really classify this as talking it through. But then Kalani says something which I found quite interesting. She said to production, the problems in our relationship are like the elephant in the room getting bigger and bigger, and we're not addressing them. It's got to the point where we just can't stand each other right now. And when she said that, I thought, I'm pretty certain that's not what Asuelu's thinking. Asuelu thinks you have a big argument, you sweep it under the rug, and everything's absolutely fine again. I definitely don't think he's at the point of divorce, and what he said next, I think proves me right. Kalani said the boys are getting older now, and I don't want them to see a bad relationship. And Asuelu said, how bad is it? If it carries on like this, we won't be married anymore. And he said, really? He's genuinely surprised. For some reason, he thinks calling her an effing bitch and a crazy asshole will have no long-lasting or detrimental effect on their relationship, just like a 2-year-old. And so Kalani brings up the subject of going to see a therapist again. And Asuelu agrees to go, as long as the therapist isn't white. Asuelu, a therapist could come from fricking Mars and they would not be on your side. It doesn't make any difference. But he decides to try and convince us. If it's a white person, they won't understand my side. Asuelu, if it's an adult, they won't understand your side. And Kalani said, they're not necessarily white, anybody can be a therapist. Come on now, Kalani, what are the chances that they're Samoan? And nevertheless, I'm fairly certain if you've got any Samoan person and said, I'm married with 2 young children, I earn $1,000 a month, my mother wants me to gift her $1,000 a month, I would like to do it. My wife doesn't really want to do it because she says we'll have no money. Who do you think's right? You're right, Asuelu. Guess why? Because you're head of household. Asuelu, you can be head of household, but if you're an idiot at the same time, unfortunately, we have to take your title away from you. That's just kind of how life works. And then Asuelu said, I'd at least like to speak my own language. I'm sure you would, Asuelu. That way you can coat the life out of Kalani, and she'll never, ever know. But then Kalani said, well, we'll get an interpreter, and I think that's the best that we can do. And finally, Kalani said to production that she's past her breaking point, and that therapy is the very last option. And my friends, this is what I mean about Asuelu when I say he isn't wrapped too tight. So his thought process is, let's have a Samoan man because he will be able to see things from my point of view and that will be fair. And I think he's always looking for just someone to back him up, just someone to agree with him. He never actually seeks to make the relationship better or to solve the problems. And as far as I'm concerned, Asuelu's one of life's laxatives. He really does irritate the crap out of me. And so Asuelu and Kalani sit outside the therapist's office and they're holding hands and they're kind of kissing them and caressing each other. And then they go in to see the therapist and they're introduced to Lana, the translator. And the therapist tells them to sit down and he says, is Samoan your first language? And Asuelu said yes. And he asked Kalani, do you understand Samoan? And she said only bits and pieces. Bits and pieces indeed. Effing bitch, bloody arsehole, stupid cow. Just the essentials for life with Asuelu. And the therapist begins by saying, how did you meet? And Asuelu describes the first time he saw Kalani and he thought she was absolutely beautiful. In fact, big and beautiful, but he liked this because it proved that her family had fed her well. And Kalani explained, it's a compliment. Is it, Kalani, or does it just display wealth? I'm not 100% sure. And then the therapist asked, why are you here? And Kalani resists the urge to say, because my husband's a dickhead. And instead she says, we don't see eye to eye about anything. And Asuelu said, we fight about my family asking me for money. And then Kalani says she doesn't want to give them any money, and also she doesn't want to listen to me. This makes me very mad and frustrated. And the therapist said, I see, so you see this as somewhat a respect issue. And Kalani said, every time we see them we do give them money, but I say that we can only give what we can afford. And the therapist said, I see, so you've got different ways of looking at money. And then Asuelu decides to speak in Samoan, and he tells them in Samoa, the dad is the head and the mum is the neck. Where have we heard that before? We heard exactly the same thing in Moldova, remember, with Elizabeth's brother and sister-in-law. And Asuelu continues, there's a line that the mother should not cross with the father. And then he continues that he was really unhappy when Kalani went to speak with his family alone, and then she came back and told him we're no longer speaking to them. He feels that she tried to ruin the relationship between him and his family. So I'd like to discuss this in a little bit more detail, because at the time I knew this was exactly the wrong thing to say. So the family were obviously very rude to Kalani, and they were also unreasonable in asking for an amount of money which they couldn't give. But I do think that Kalani overstepped the mark when she said, that's it, we're done, we're not speaking with your family again, because that is Asuelu's decision to make. And from what I think, and from what you guys, my subscribers, say, is that that was never her decision to make. She should have just told him what they said and the way that they said it, and left the relationship to degenerate on its own. It almost certainly would have done in due course anyway, because his mum and sisters are only out for his money. And then Kalani tells the therapist something quite interesting. She said, when we were in Samoa, I had a conversation with him and I said I hope that we can be equals and help each other out, and I told him this flat out. And he agreed to this and he agreed with me. And then when he came to America, he's like, I'm a Samoan man. So Kalani always wanted a 50-50 relationship. Well, she's got it. She cooks, he eats. She irons, he wrinkles. She cleans, he dirties. As far as I'm concerned, to get what she wants from Asuelu, she should be saying, I want to make all decisions. And then when they enter into reasonable negotiations, they'll come out at a 50-50 relationship. Remember guys, when you're negotiating about something, you have to think about your starting point. If your starting point isn't going to bring you to your end point, you shift your starting point further out. Or maybe she should try a leaf out of Daddy Ebird's book. And my dad always used to tell me growing up, never ever compromise. Either do it his way or you do it your way. That way there's always at least one person who's happy. If you compromise, neither one of you are happy. Thanks, Daddy Ebird. You've been a tremendous help. And so then the therapist said something which I think was a little bit like putting 20 on 10. He said, so we did a bait and switch. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar, a bait and switch is usually a sales tactic in which a customer is attracted by the advertisement of a low priced item but then is encouraged to buy a higher priced one. Quite often they're told the lower priced item is no longer available, but what about this? And I don't think this situation is as cut and dried as that. Very probably, Asuelu did agree, yeah, it'll be 50-50, yeah, we'll help each other out. But in a classic bait and switch, it's your intention to say whatever you've got to say, knowing when you get to the other place, you're going to change your mind and say, nope, this is what it is now. And whilst it may well could have been that, I think it's more likely that it's extremely difficult to unlearn what has been taught to you over 20 odd years that is entirely normal. And Asuelu somewhat backs this up by saying, yeah, it's sometimes hard to unlearn 23 years of programming, it takes time. This is my first time off the island. But what we unfortunately don't get to with this conversation is, did he agree to it and now he's changed his mind, or now he can't physically do it? Or did he never agree to it in the first place? Or was the whole conversation lost in translation, which is entirely possible as well? Unfortunately, this therapist is no Dr. Kirk, and he doesn't, in my mind, manage to get to the bottom of things. And the therapist tells them they both have homework and they need to write down how the jobs and responsibilities in the home are divided. And the therapist tells producers they're holding hands and they have really tender feelings for each other. But over the next couple of months, if they can't iron out this issue of superiority in the relationship, they would be much happier apart. And so going home in the car, Kalani said, how do you think it went? Asuelu said, yeah, I agree with everything the guy said. The guy didn't say too much. And Kalani said, yeah, I felt like the guy was cool. And Asuelu said, the only way to save our relationship is if you and my family make amends. And Kalani said, I don't know if I can do that after how things ended. And Asuelu says to producers, I realised after talking to the therapist that Kalani made decisions that ruined my relationship with my family. And for us to get back on track, our two families must get along. And so guys, this in essence, as I see it, is the problem. Asuelu always picks on one thing or one incident and makes every bit of discord they have in their relationship about that one thing, instead of looking at the wider argument. So after the first therapy session, Asuelu fails to realise that your mum isn't close with you anyway. She didn't come to your wedding, she didn't attend the birth of either of your children, she hasn't paid any attention to you thus far. If you give her money, she will love you, and if you do not give her money, she doesn't want to know you. Ditto your two sisters. So the bottom line of it all is, it's nothing to do with Kalani. Kalani is just making you realise that love should be unconditional and never ever tied to money. Also, you're willfully trying to ignore the fact that your sister said some awful things to Kalani, and Kalani just wants your support in you telling your sister, you cannot talk to my wife and the mother of my two children like that. And even Kalani said, I can't believe that this was Asuelu's takeaway after therapy. I'm not sure how we got here. Kalani, I can tell you how he got there. He's a half-wit. Asuelu is hard of thinking. I've already started calling him Asuelu 51 because he's not playing with a full deck. And this is where we leave things for this week. And so guys, my takeaway from all of this is it's an impossible movement for Asuelu. So firstly, Asuelu isn't sold on the fact that women should have equal say to men in the first instance. So it's not as if he thinks, well, I don't mind, but other people mind. He thinks himself that he should be the head and Kalani should be the neck. Secondly, he's got very close ties to the Samoan community. So he teaches Samoan dance, and so obviously that's going to be quite a Samoan environment. He goes and plays basketball with a group of Samoan guys. He listens a lot to his mum and his sister and his family back home. So even though he's living in America, he's kind of in a semi-Samoan bubble within America. And whilst he's in that bubble, he's never going to draw the conclusion that, yeah, we should be equal, we should both have equal say. I think it's exceedingly difficult for someone to be brought up one way for 23 years and to change his lifelong thought processes. To Asuelu, it wouldn't make any logical sense to listen to Kalani because he believes that men are more intelligent and more able to make decisions than women are. So I want to do a quick example for you. In our society, adults tell children what to do, and that's just the way it is. Imagine you went to another land where children, even very young children, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, had equal say to adults. How quickly do you think you would be able to get your mind around taking orders from a 5 or 6-year-old? It would be exceedingly difficult. And it's our natural belief that children are less intelligent or less able to make decisions than we are. And because of that ingrained belief, however intelligent the child was and however stupid the adult was, in almost every circumstance, we would put the adult in charge, and that's what we're dealing with Asuelu. He just doesn't see that women are of equal intelligence. So guys, let me know what you think on this issue. Do you think this relationship is redeemable? And do you think, like I do, that Kalani should have thought about all of this before she got married to him and brought him over, because there was really no way that you were undoing all of these years of misogyny? And also, would you prefer Dr. Kirk instead of this therapist? I don't feel like the therapist pulled Asuelu upon the fact that I've asked you a question and you've answered a different question. And as we see from the first look for this week's episode, Asuelu's family are going to be meeting Kalani's family, and I expect fireworks. What do you guys think will be the outcome? So guys, you know I love looking at all your comments, so please put them down below and I'll answer as many as I can. And please, if you've yet to do so, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, make Ebird a very happy Ebird, and I'll be back soon with another review. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Ebird Online. Ciao for now.